Hey, what's good, ladies and gentlemen? It is your man Vaughan here with another interview segment here on We Create Music TV. Glad that you're able to tune in and join us tonight for talking with Fugitive Moods. He is a singer, songwriter, and a producer, and we're here to get really into his business and all about him tonight. So let's give a warm welcome to Fugitive Moods. Man, welcome. Welcome to the show. I am so glad that you're here.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to just learn more about you, to share you with our audience, and to just really dive into, who you are as a creative.
Definitely. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So if you can just start us off by just walking us through your musical journey. How did you get started? Kind of give us some background about you, and yeah, I'm super excited to learn more.
Absolutely. Well, so I'm based out of New Mexico, and I grew up in New Mexico, and that's where I started my whole musical journey and where I still am. I came in through kind of maybe not a back door, a sideways door. I started writing in the 90s. I was really kind of just immersed in hip hop, and I was crazy about being a DJ, and really wanted to get into that. But as it goes for a teenage kid in the 90s with no money and broke in New Mexico, there wasn't quite the budget for Technique 1200s at the time. So I started writing, and one thing led to another. I mean, I was just on that path. And naturally I gravitated toward making beats at some point around them. And really, I think why I say I came in through a sideways door is I had just no background in music whatsoever. Not just like, any kind of training on an instrument or, band at school or anything. I didn't even grow up in a house with music. I was raised by single mom. She's like kind of an anomaly in the universe. Like, she doesn't listen to music. It's the weirdest it's the weirdest thing. So I wasn't really exposed to anything. And I got into hip hop in the 90s. I mean, obviously, it is the kind of transformative music of my generation, I would say. And I was just swept away by mainly East Coast stuff at the time, Tribe Called Quest, De La, Jungle Brothers, whatever, and like the Roots, stuff like that. And that's all I knew, really. I was just, into that and whatever was on the radio. And that was pretty much my musical universe. And then I think one of the big breakthroughs for me after I started writing raps and, I was freestyling and getting into ciphers and stuff, I'd gotten a hold of an old 4-track recorder, like an old tape recorder, and a sampler, a Zoom ST224 for any of the producers out there who might be interested. It's an incredible little sampler that I got my hands on in the late 90s and started making beats. And one thing that I knew to do about music was to sample vinyl records. That's about all I knew was, you dig vinyl, you find some drum breaks, you loop some stuff, you put it together. And I had been getting into kind of independent hip hop at that time because, I think recording technology was starting to shift. Groups like, I'd say a really important one at the time was probably Living Legends in California. They were doing it all themselves on 4 tracks, dubbing tapes, selling it out of their, the trunk of their car, going on tour in Europe, all this stuff that was crazy.
Wow.
So, I just started down that path, and I'd say the big interesting part of that experience was a lot of my music education came from the vinyl records. And, I don't know how into vinyl you are, but certainly in the 90s, it wasn't as popular or in vogue as it is today, and
Mm-hmm.
people were just giving this stuff away, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
you go to any thrift store around the corner and you find 25-cent records, everything from like classic rock to country to jazz to, you know, esoteric Turkish drum music or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? And it was, I started acquiring records to sample. And I thought in my mind at the time, it's like I didn't want to do it the same way that necessarily everybody else had done it. And so I was looking for really obscure cuts, you know, especially for the sound bass. And and that's really what turned me on to all sorts of different genres. I mean, you know, you go through the list, it's like I was just saying, country, jazz, blues, rock, classic rock, you know, 50s, 60s, 70s, Broadway show tunes, whatever. And I just started listening to the music, and it really changed. It changed everything. Those vinyl records for me. And the more I dug, the more interested I became, just in the history, the culture of not just any particular genre of music, but kind of the real history of the human experience that was cataloged in those 12-inch vinyls.
Right.
Um, and you know, back then it was before computer um, based production,
Right.
and so it was really analog. And I was just experimenting like crazy, you know. You might see a bass back here. This is,
Mm-hmm.
let me see if I get it right. This one, bam, that little old Squired bass. You know, my partner at the time, my music partner, um, his dad had given him, and I just plugged it into the sampler and started playing bass lines, just trying to figure out what was going on. And little by little, I accumulated this base of knowledge about sound and theory and dynamics and
Mm.
arrangement and style, you know, from every imaginable kind of music. And I
Right.
think when I was getting this most recent record together, because this is my first solo debut, it's a real departure from some of my hip hop roots, and in terms of kind of the way that I've approached it. And I
Mm-hmm.
really, as I was reflecting on just how I got there, I think a lot of it really had to do with that exploration, that, you know, in the universes of music on those 12-inch vinyl records,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, it's kind of a, you know, kind of a roundabout way to getting where I am now. You know, but my longtime associate, bless infinite, of my former group, you know, we had very, I don't know, maybe naively started a group here, a duo, the two of us. Um, and you know, in New Mexico at the time, in the kind of early 2000s, um, there wasn't a tremendous, you know, rap scene or hip hop scene, if you
Right.
could imagine. You know, it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of the middle of nowhere in Albuquerque, and even at the time, a lot of opportunities were pretty limited. A lot of the clubs here, you know, they weren't going to give really any rap group a chance to perform. There was a lot of bad associations with the genre in the city. And so, you know, us with a handful of people who were just super motivated, you know, started putting together shows, little shows and little spots and little back alley, like not even clubs or bars or anything at the time, just like really DIY underground shows. And, you know, little by little, the scene started here. And, you know, we just got a lot of experience throwing shows and putting those events together. And one thing led to another, and jump cut, you know, 20 years later, as crazy as that is to say,
Right.
you know,
Right.
it's a lot more vibrant now, you know, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
young talent has come up and had better venues, better foundation to kind of develop and grow. And you know, I think somewhere along the line, I really discovered a voice for myself outside of rapping. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and because I really didn't have any idea about how to do music. And as I was experimenting more and more, I found something in my voice, and kind of moved toward that. Something was drawing me there. So over the years, I kind of kept experimenting and kept challenging myself, and here we end up with this new album, self-titled Fugitive Moods, and I honestly I couldn't be prouder of it. If I had to wait 20 years and do it all over again, I'd do it.
Well, that's good. That's good. Because it's a good thing when your first work kind of embodies who you are as an individual and the experiences that you've been going through. I mean, so how did you come up with the name Fugitive Moods?
Well, so that's a good question. It's actually a reference to an H.P. Lovecraft story. Not that I'm a huge Lovecraft fan. Are you familiar with Lovecraft at all?
No, not so much.
So I'm not even that big a fan, but a friend of mine had given me this book, and basically the idea was this person is exploring the mountains of madness, and they come upon this ancient horror or whatever, and there's this, at some point the author is describing that experience, and he couples these couple words, fugitive moods. And it struck me, it was like a hammer, because I was reinventing myself after 20 years releasing albums, and doing all this stuff in my former group, touring around the US and Europe. I had to reinvent myself. My life had changed around 2016, and with that change was a complete kind of change in my identity. And so I was looking for something that I identified with, and I had gone through such an upheaval in my personal life and in my music career. Everything kind of fell apart. It all got derailed. Like, there was just all sorts of circumstances that led to really, the two most important things to me: my career in music and my family kind of falling apart. And I had to rediscover something else. And I felt I was honestly scared. I was really scared.
Right.
I didn't know. I really didn't know what the future was going to be like. I didn't know if I would write another song, or if I would really even. I mean, I was struggling day in and day out to get on my feet and raise my kids, honestly. And I had come across this line, and the way that it was described, the fugitive, like the kind of outside of the norm, or outside of the laws or the bounds of reality in a lot of ways, and the kind of moodiness or depth and sincerity of feeling that I was feeling and trying to put into my music. It just really, it synthesized, and it made total sense to me, and yeah, that's how I got here.
Wow. Yeah, I think the great creatives have all gone through just something crazy in their lives, right? I mean, whether it's dealing with family, tragedy, just maybe just the things that they themselves go through on a personal basis. I think we all go through something crazy. This world is crazy, and I don't mean that in a term of literal craziness. It's just things happen, and sometimes we may not understand why those things happen. Sometimes those things that happen are made to build us up stronger. I remember I went through a period of being, and people who watch the show, they kind of know this. I went through a period of homelessness, and having a wife and 2 young kids and a baby on the way, and sleeping in our Jeep, and sleeping in abandoned houses, and just trying to put a roof over our head. And it was tough to deal with. But I firmly believe that the things that we go through is meant to make us stronger, is to help us to reshape who we are as people, and to really learn from those things so that we can grow. I don't know if I ever tell anybody, I'm sorry that you went through the things that you've gone through. I think those things, and I think you probably can agree with that. That even the things that you've gone through yourself have made you a stronger individual, made you a stronger creative as well.
Absolutely. I think that that sentiment really underlines not just, my work as a creative person or as a musician, but just as a human being.
As a human
I
being.
think, yeah, I think that, sometimes, and just to reiterate or echo what you said, it's, I think a lot of creative people are maybe able to channel some of that experience, but we all go through it. And that's the real transcendent piece there, is that, somehow for one reason or another, creative people are led down certain paths, either with music or visual art or poetry, or whatever it may be. And they're able to translate some of that human experience into something that we can understand even on a deeper level, because words don't always really do it.
Right.
I mean, when you talk about your own experience, of homelessness with a family, I don't know if there's any words that can articulate the kind of, fear or uncertainty or, pressure that you feel during those moments. And somehow it's that art and that creativity, that outlet that helps to maybe articulate, and for some of us express that,
Right.
and I think it's really, really powerful. And I do want to say that I don't think that I think that sometimes there is this conflation for great art, that somehow like great artists are at the edge of sanity, which can be true with exception. I mean, some of the
Right.
greatest are,
Right.
well, borderline nuts.
Right.
But I think that's not everybody. And I think the truth is that we all go through tremendously difficult experiences. And that is not just fuel for creative work, but like you said, it really is the basis for how we grow. It's not even like, oh, if we learn from the obstacles, it's really how we learn
How?
from it.
That's
You
right.
know?
That's right. It's really how we learn from those situations that take place, and then what do we do based upon what we've learned, right? There's the saying is knowledge is power. Okay, but if I have knowledge and do nothing with it, I mean, what good is that knowledge if I don't really execute on it? And so, kind of the same things apply. Like, I can learn various types of things throughout my life, but if I don't ever apply what I've learned to my situation, to my ability to be a creative, to my family, to helping other individuals, then it really means, for me, it really means nothing, just because I've learned this or I've learned that. But if I don't execute on it, then what good is it really going to do myself or anybody that I come in contact with if I'm not executing properly and putting those things into action?
Yeah, it's almost like the suffering is for nothing. I mean, I think that ultimately we're all going to encounter that suffering, and it's almost our responsibility to learn from it and apply it, like you're saying.
That's right.
And I think that that's it. It's so great. I feel like this is just exactly the right conversation to have, because with this project, it really is about that. It's not so much in the content itself, which there is some of that, but it's in the process of experiencing, overcoming, and kind of growing with grace, and growing into even a better version of oneself than you could have really ever imagined.
That's right.
And I think that's we kind of got started here with the name, and
Right.
I don't know how much that it services the conversation, but I think that this idea that we're talking about is so fundamental to kind of everybody's experience in the world, that I feel like if I'm able in the music to even channel a little bit of that sentiment, a little bit of that learning, a little bit of that understanding, and share
Mm-hmm.
it with you, or one person, 10 people, as few or as many as I can. It's like, I feel like I'm servicing that experience, and utilizing that experience and that suffering in a positive way.
That's right. So since we've been talking about some of those things, let me ask you, so what motivates you as a creative? Like, where do you find your motivation? Where do you find your inspiration, your muse for the work that you create?
It's, I think that it's really in that human condition. It's love and loss, and injustice, and suffering, and all the beautiful things that we can experience in this life, and all of the horrible things. I think
Mm,
it's all right there. It's all right before us, kind of every day, in more or less quantity. And so I really
right.
find the muse there. I don't personally project too much. I feel
Mm,
like I channel something, and not like I'm some, soothsaying sage. It's just really when I feel like my creative process is at its best, that I'm kind of submitting to the muse and just allowing it to communicate through me. And part of that is my experience, and part of that is my technique and my craft that I've cultivated, for decades, that helps facilitate that. But ideally, it's not a self-serving process.
I always think it's interesting, what you just said as far as you let it speak through you and to exude itself, from that position. I think a lot of times, and I know a lot of artists and writers and songwriters, and sometimes things sometimes are forced. It's like, okay, let me go to the studio today and let me sit there and really try to figure out how to just write songs, and let me stay
Mhm.
in the studio for 20 hours and, really just be here. And I think a lot of what happens in music happens outside of the studio space. That human experience, the human condition, and engaging with nature and with other people, and just being a witness to the things that are happening in society. I think those things give way to kind of what you said, like the more creative aspect of music. I don't know how creative I can be sitting in the studio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's just me and this computer, and no really human interaction, human needs. I don't really know what's going on in the world to kind of tell, the story that I really want to tell. I think experiencing
Absolutely.
those, yeah.
I 100% agree. I think that there's, it's one of those things. As a creative person, there's a fine balance, between craft and inspiration. I think we were talking about the early days of at least my musical journey, and I can say 100% that I was not any good to start with. I had to work really hard and fail
Right.
a ton of times before I figured anything out.
Mm-hmm.
And but I knew somewhere in there, in that experience, I had a vision, right? I knew what was possible. So I kind of went through the motions, and I did long stints in the studio, and I did the work to maybe write songs that were more like servicing the needs of the recording session in that moment, or
Mm,
whatever, so that when the time came and that inspiration was really there, in the most sincere way, that I could make the best use of it as possible. And that's where I think this newest project for me, it really does feel like the culmination of that vision from when I was
mm-hmm.
a teenager, just writing raps and really having no idea what I was doing, to making beats and exploring
Right.
all these new,
Right.
fascinations with music, and not having the skill, not having the technique, but showing up again and again and
Mm-hmm.
again and again, despite the failures. And we all know, in music, I mean, if you're not good with rejection, if you're not good with people not liking it,
Right.
you're going to have a really hard time. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
most people hang up their guitar, or put it down, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not easy. But if you show up again and again and again and again, there's going to be those windows where that opportunity is before you. And I think that this record for me is like I said, it really is the culmination of that. And if I had to go through all of it again, and I will spare the listeners, the gory details, but I would do it, because looking back and knowing what I know now, and knowing that I will face more challenges, I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't take away anything if it's what led me here to this moment today.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's perfect. Because so you've said several times that when you got into this whole music thing, you didn't really know anything about the whole music stuff, right? So what did you do to kind of learn that and to prepare yourself to be a creative?
It's a great question. I think there's so many things. I think I often tell people that it almost requires a certain foolishness, because I think that had I been aware of my own, failures in style and execution, looking back in some of the things that I made, had I been aware how bad it really sucked what I was doing, I don't know if I would have continued, because I knew that there was something better possible. Because I mean, it's trial and error, it's failure, it's bad recordings, it's bad songs, it's bad beats, it's bad, it's bad notes, it's bad shows. Man, I've fallen off stage, which is like horrifying. And it's just going through those experiences. So needless to say, I always watch where my feet are and where the chords are on a stage now. But it's just showing up with that. I say it tongue in cheek, the foolishness, but what I really mean by that is the dedication.
Right.
If you believe in something, if you have a vision, you're not going to get it right at first.
You're not.
No creative person does.
And no creative person does. Yeah, right.
Yeah, you just got to keep showing up.
Yeah, I think sometimes from what I see, I personally think sometimes that we live in a generation where, and it's no knock against the new generation, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that I think that there is the propensity to identify that whatever they're working on is automatically going to be at its highest level. It is automatically going to be great, and not really understanding that there are some things that may happen. The song may not be the best song as possible. The beat may suck. The writing may, it could be whatever it turns out to be. But I think it's the propensity to kind of think now that if I make this song, if I go into the studio, whatever I work on now is going to be the best thing that anybody has ever heard in the history of music. And sometimes it's not. And they have
usually it isn't. I mean, we've
usually it isn't
for long enough. I think most, if not every single person I know has never charted on like the Billboard Top 40, right? Like But I would say this though, to defend the next generation, because I think there was probably a bit of that in me. It's like this belief, or that's kind of what I'm talking about with the foolishness.
Right.
I really thought this kind of like obscure Turkish sample was going to blow people's mind in the 90s, you know what I mean? And like people were going to be like, oh man, this guy really knows what he's doing. But it was a bit of that foolishness, thinking that it actually could be something that led me to the next thing, and I think that even though I think what kind of throws it off now is back then you really had to work to share it. Whereas now you can really create something and 5 minutes later have it live. And I think that expectation is out of line. Like, my where I come from, the first album I released, I call it an album. It was like 20 songs, but we were literally dubbing
It's 2
tapes
albums.
on a boombox.
Right.
Yeah, so it was like a 45-minute A side and a 45-minute B side.
Wow.
Dubbing it on
tapes.
that we bought at Radio Shack.
Of course. I remember that.
And so like that was labor intensive, we'll say. So there wasn't immediate gratification. There wasn't that immediate feedback, or even that culture of creative people. I think that now, with the tools at the disposal and the instantaneous publishing potential, everybody's a creative. But really, when you have to sit there and listen live and dub your tape, that kind of cuts most people out of that process.
Right.
Most people aren't going to do that.
No.
You know?
Right,
and so I think that we have a lot more people that are engaged in the work and have very disparate expectations about what can come of it. Now, I think that there's 2 sides to that, and there's a good and a bad side, like with everything, right? The good side is that I think we're actually really living through a golden era of, recorded music. I think some of the music coming out now, because there's so much access, because there's so many people, that I think that there's so many more people with an opportunity. People like myself. I mean, I didn't really have an opportunity. I had to create it, but not everybody gets that chance. Not everybody is foolish enough to just proceed without thinking twice about it. And now, so we have a lot of people engaged in it, which is great. The bad part is, there is a lot of garbage out there. With the good comes the bad. There's a lot of people thinking they're doing something amazing, and I'm not going to be the one to tell them, but
I'm not going to be the one to tell them. So that's what I was talking about, right? Like I said, so in the beginning when I said it's no knock against the newer generation, and to clarify my statement, I'm not saying that I want anybody that's out there who's making music to not think that your music is the best music that you're making. But I think there's a reality that once you start getting that feedback and once you start understanding, just the ins and outs of music and what works, what doesn't, I'm not saying there's rules to it, but some music is just whack, right? And even when they get that feedback, they're like, nah, man, it's still the hottest stuff that I've ever heard in my life. And it's like, to me, that right there is what I'm talking about. The person who's not able to take the feedback and the criticism, to learn from it and to make what they do better. They just automatically think that whatever, the music I still got is still gonna be the hottest stuff that's out there.
It's funny though that I think that there's some weird parallel between like nature and maybe the music, and that I think natural selection will kind of like weed those people out eventually.
Yeah, it happens. It happens.
You can only ride that way for so long,
right?
Without actually listening to the feedback and trying to improve.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So, man, I want to spend the time that we got talking about this debut album. So, this is what I'm going to say. One, I appreciate you sending. That's right, everybody. I got exclusive listenage. Is that a word? Listenage? But if it's not, I made it up. But I was able to listen to the entire Fugitive Moods album today. So before I ask you about the music and the creation process and all that stuff, you remind me of like, as soon as I heard These Walls, I was like, oh man, this sounds just like Portugal the Man. That type of vibe. It had that vibe. I was like, this is like a Portugal the Man vibe right here. And then I was like, and then when I heard the album today, I was like, oh, this is like that John Bellion type vibe too. Like, oh man, like just that real instrumentation. Still, it has that hip hop feel. I can still tell through I'll let you talk about the whole thing. But my impression was, as I was listening to it, I was like, oh, he got them hip hop drums still in there. There's still a lot of soul that's built into it. there's a lot of I don't know if the word I want to use is eclectic, but yeah, it's it's an album. And there's not many albums that I listen to and I go, oh yeah, this is an album. So talk to us about your debut album, Fugitive Moods, and your concept behind the album itself.
Well, I first let me just say thank you. I mean, I think getting any good, you know, reference point is really helpful because sometimes, what is the cliche? You can't tell the forest from the trees, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like I'm so steeped in it. I have no idea what it even sounds like anymore, honestly. And you
Mm.
touched on the eclecticness of it, and I think that that is a fair word. I think in some of my press materials, we're using genre bending or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and it is and you nailed it because this is how I see it. It's fundamentally they're hip hop beats for sure,
For
and
sure.
then there's all these other influences that kind of build on that
Mm-hmm.
foundation of beat making, that legacy of like basement beat making style
Right.
production. A lot of loops, but organic instrumentation,
Right.
and so you really nailed it there. And then saying that it really feels like an album is maybe the greatest compliment, sincerely, because I spoke about my love of 12-inch vinyl
Mm-hmm.
and the experience that you have in music, and I think that people returning to that format lately, it really indicates that there is something important about the experience that somebody has with an artist and how an album begins,
Mm-hmm.
how it progresses, and how it ends. And that's really important to me. Really important that it's
Me
not
too.
just a collection of singles,
Yep.
you know, and that it is not just an attempt to gain as much attention with one song or another, that it really worked cohesively. And one of the really exciting pieces about this album, and I think something that maybe other creatives out there might be interested in, was a a, a change in the way that I approached um, my own kind of mindset when I came to make the record, which was I like I said, I talked about my past a bit. I released a bunch of records and toured all over the U.S. and in Europe, and like we were doing great, and but it felt like we were always reaching for something, like reaching for uh, the next you know big step forward, which isn't a bad thing, but it can get, oh man, it can get difficult. There's just so many obstacles before you. And when I had to
Right.
go through this process to reinvent myself, to understand kind of my life as it had changed after this major kind of breakdown, uh, I had to reevaluate what was important to me. And it was really important that I never had any of my music on vinyl. And I talked to you, I mean, when I thought about it,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think, well, I want to be on the magazine cover, or I want 500 people at the record release, or I want, you know, I really wanted a 12-inch, period. Black, 180 gram, 12-inch vinyl record.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I prioritized. And so I went about making the record that I wanted to make. And so, when you listen to it, even streaming, there is an arc, an ebb and a flow, and or at least what I hope the listener experiences is a momentum and a sequence, and kind of an emotional cascade that you arrive, to the side B and then the end. And so I did that very intentionally. And then because of that kind of personal investigation, and putting that kind of dream of mine, I mean, and it's not an exaggeration to say it was a dream to have my music on vinyl. um, I really designed it that way. So the length, the kind of number of tracks, um, and then um, I was determined to do it. So I did a very kind of small scale pre-order, which didn't, it wasn't about making the biggest splash and the biggest,
Mm-hmm.
a pre-order for a limited edition vinyl. And so I was able to do that. And so the vinyl is currently in production,
Wow.
which is like, it's a total dream come true for me,
Yeah, bravo.
and yeah, and I think that we can get to the process stuff in a second, but there is this business component too,
Mm.
it's like, and I think that it's really important. I know a lot of creative people struggle with, you know, kind of how to monetize their work.
Right.
And sometimes I think that that's the wrong question to ask. Like there's this weird, world in which you become a megastar and a millionaire, but that's not the real world for most people.
Right.
Most people have to work for their money,
Mm-hmm.
and creative people are no different. And you want to be able to be engaged with work that means something to you. And when your values are out of line with what you're actually doing, it gets really hard to do the work. And so for me, like I said, it wasn't about 100,000 streams on Spotify. I did 100 records. And if that's, that was more important. So I prioritized that. And by doing that, I got so much more value out of the process and actually was able to access a creative process that was more in line with kind of my values, you know? And and when it came to the design, the actual kind of, sonic piece,
Mm-hmm.
the album from start to finish, that was just a very carefully crafted exercise that I had already been engaged with since the late '90s. I had always been thinking about the track orders and how the listener experiences that, because I think I was lucky enough to come into music before streaming,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I think now, we're finding that value that the listener gets is not just the instantaneous kind of rush of a good hook, or the feeling of that one song. People are coming back to vinyl because they're seeing that experience and that relationship is actually an
Mm-hmm.
important facet to their musical experience as a listener. And so I know that's a lot. That's a whole
No,
lot
that's perfect.
to drop, but I mean that's how I think about it.
That's perfect because the way that I connect with an artist is by listening to an album. Because for me, the album tells their story. It tells their journey. It should be cohesive. I should know in the beginning, right? So it kind of tells that story, and like you said, it has that ebbs and flows. Singles to me are just, and that's what I can tell about this album, that is not an album just full of singles, as most albums are, right? So I forgot who I was talking to, but we live now in a single dominated world where it's like, let me just drop a single. Okay, let me drop another single. And it's like, but there's no cohesiveness to them. It's just, here's one song and it sounds completely different, or it may sound the same, but there's no connectivity, connectedness to those songs. And when I listen to this album, I can tell that there's a connectedness. There is a symmetry between all of the different songs, and I love the way that they've just the flow of them. When it goes, I'm looking at the album here, but the way that it goes from, you don't mind me naming the tracks, do you? Okay, so
No.
how it goes from A Whisper Away, and then it leads to the Break Me Down. But even from A Whisper Away until I got through Break Me Down and then into Halt, I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of hear just the sonics and the story that's being told. And then when I got to 10,000 Suns, I was like, oh, oh, okay. And it was like, it just caught me off guard with what I don't know who the person is saying what they were saying. I don't want to give it away of what they were saying, but it kind of like was a oh, but then when it went from 10,000 Suns into these walls, I was like, oh wow, it was just a bridge of how it just flowed, and then from there to back to Barcelona. And so I can tell you now that my favorite so far in the song, and I've only listened to it once, but these walls. I love Back to Barcelona. I love the feel of Back to Barcelona. I love what you were doing on your Instagram when you were doing just the instrumental playing of Back to Barcelona. I was like, oh wow, that's awesome. But then again, I can't play a single instrument, but I love live instrumentation, and I love the strings on at the end of these walls. I just love the strings. I was like, oh man, it just had that vibe. It had that. Like I said, it reminded me of like John Bellion or like AJR, right? And so to kind of have that still hip hoppy type feel, but with that live instrumentation, those live string. I'm sitting here doing this, like those live strings and piano and violin and bass and just all those elements. But I can tell you, these walls, Back to Barcelona, perfect as you is, and Worried with Love are just, all those songs are great. But as soon as I heard those, I was like, wow. Perfect As You Is has a nice upbeat rhythm. I was like, oh, I like that. so congratulations. The album is very cohesive. And it takes you on a journey. And I think that's what's missing when I listen to albums today, is they don't take me on a journey. I think the last album that I listened to that took me on a journey was outside of people that I know. All right, so outside of my cousin Superstar 6, who's an artist, outside of maybe his album that he needs to release, which is coming, and a friend of mine, Jay West, his album, which is awesome. Most albums, I think the last album that I really connected with was J. Cole's 2014 Forest Hill Drives album, because it told a story. It told a story about his life, his journey, and it just connected me. There's a lot of songs that I could resonate with on that album. And I think this album is going to resonate with a lot of people. And people know me. I don't say stuff that I don't mean. I'll tell people the truth, like, oh, that was whack. You shouldn't do that. But this album has that cohesiveness, that connectedness, and I appreciated that.
Well, I deeply appreciate the feedback. I mean, it really does mean the world to me. It's what I set out to do, and the fact that that you're able to connect with it that way is like, it's like, all right, I've done it. I mean, if it's only you, I'm
it won't be
mission accomplished. But I wanted to remark about a couple things in there, and you talked about the strings, as we're like air cello.
Right, that's right, air cellos.
And I just have to shout out Ted Graham, who is the cellist on there. I didn't play the cello parts. I'm not, I play some instruments, none very well, but he came in late in the process. I had written a lot of string parts for the record, and very just through serendipity and chance, we met and started to collaborate, and he really added so much. He came with such strong ideas to the process, and just really changed the face of the record. The strings is always something I wanted, but his participation and his input really just put it over the edge. You mentioned the last bit on These Walls, and that probably says it all. It's just this beautiful string arrangement. So shout out to Ted, because he killed it. And
he did.
And I think that the ebb and the flow in the album itself. Actually, can I plug something real quick?
Yeah, of course.
because if people, you've got the special access, and the album will be coming out early next year. But if any of the listeners out there are interested, I still do have a small selection of that limited edition vinyl still available. You can find it on my website. There's all sorts of bells and whistles with it, but you get the 12-inch pre-order and the full album in advance of the release next year. So people can check that out. And there's also a free EP with a limited selection in addition to These Walls, which is out everywhere now as the first single. But I think that that flow and that story and everything that you remarked on is so critical. And that's where, to me, it really intersects with this. For me, it's really a story of kind of overcoming those challenges, and the album itself, the thing represents it. It is the living kind of metaphor for overcoming that. And I guess just a little side story. Well, I mean, I would say before I say this that it's so deeply personal. Like, I'm so sincere about that experience that I really trust that the people who will get it, will understand that, and the people who won't can get out of the way. They can listen to whatever else. I don't want them to hear it. But I feel like people that will understand that the kind of totality of what I've tried and the sincerity for which I believe I've done it, that it it will mean something to them, and that's essential to the experience, is creating that relationship. Even if we don't know each other, it's like creating that relationship between listener and musician. And that's when I stepped back to make this, that was so important to me. And that the little story I was going to tell is just about I guess a bit of the sincerity, because it really is something deeply personal and important to me. And when the album was finished, and I hadn't even really set a date to release These Walls yet, I started the pre-order campaign, or I had the idea to do the 12-inch and do this pre-order campaign. And my brother, I have a brother, and his friend, who had been in and around my music for forever, kept bugging me. He just had access to some of the early demos and was like, listen, whenever you're ready, I'll be the first one to buy the album. So when it came time, I told him, okay, you'll be the first person I reach out to when it's ready. And I did that. I honored that. And so I hit him up and said, listen, I've got the link. It's live. It's ready to go. Just do me a favor, test a couple things and buy the record, because I knew he was going to buy it. And he did it. And I didn't sell another one, or I didn't even tell anybody that it was there for a couple more days, because there was this experience that I had. It was physical and emotional. It was deep. That I was like really letting it go. It had started after this huge change in my life, this traumatic shift where I felt like I had lost everything. And it went through all of these stages and all of these developments and all of these changes and growth and evolution, not only just the music itself, but what was going on for me personally. And then when Miguel bought one, and that link went out with the record, I sincerely had to take a day and just collect myself before I told anybody else, because it really marked, the next chapter. And I hope that next chapter, means a lot more of connecting deeply with people and the music in a meaningful way that brings value to both of our lives, mine and yours.
That's right.
And I think that that's what an album at its best can do, and that's what I hope I'm able to do with it.
That's right. Well, I personally think you've accomplished it, and my hope is that when it is released and everybody hears this body of work, that they'll feel the same, and that they will have their own connectedness to this album as well. So for me to you, bravo, because it was great listening to it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So yeah, it was fantastic.
That's amazing. That's amazing to hear. It's it's kind of like I said in the big picture of everything. And I would say this actually for anybody listening who may be going through a hard time, like that right there is proof that it's possible, and that all of those challenges, all of those experiences, they add to a richness. And if you're able to go through it, and it's not that you have to be perfect or do everything right, or but learn from it and genuinely try to just grow and feel that it's possible. Because what you just said, I mean, really, the fact that you feel that way today it's like I sincerely need nothing else. If that's all we can share together, then we've done it. And I would say for anybody struggling through that there is those times, because we're all going through them. I mean, it's been a rough couple of years.
Yeah, that's right.
That it all adds to a much bigger picture and a beautiful tapestry. And those struggles are critical components to that. They are. I mean, I think that life is about the obstacles. It's about when you meet those obstacles and what you do when you meet them. And yeah, it's so fundamental to the story for me and this record that I just want to be able to share that with people.
Well, I can't wait for the rest of the world to hear it when it drops. So, yeah, that's gonna be awesome. So, you started talking about, for anybody who's listening, things that they can kind of take away from what, you've experienced yourself and the things that you've gone through. So what would be some other things that you would tell anyone that's trying to get into this music industry? What would be a good piece of advice for them?
If you're doing it for the money, don't be a musician. If you're doing it for the money, stop. There tends to be this weird relationship between the financial return that is possible and what actually is required to get there. And I think that we romanticize that a lot. And really, on the ground level, it's you got to put in the work, and believe in yourself and believe in the vision that you have, and know that no matter how many failures you'll face, that it's possible. I mean, we're sitting here. I had a birthday recently, and I turned 41
Happy
years
belated.
old. Thank you. And if I could go back and like whisper or like speak to my teenage self who's like sitting there writing rhymes in my notebook, that it would have taken me 25 years, or however long, to get to the point where I felt like I could actually see that vision through in its totality. Like I don't know if I would believe it. I think that maybe I would have thought it would have come quicker. But I would say always be true to that creative vision. Listen to the muse, and don't listen to the critics, and don't listen to the trends. Listen to the muse, and I think that the people who are truly humble enough to know that it's not all about them are capable of making incredible music.
Incredible. That's right. I love that. Let the muse speak. So my wife's an author. And so she, in her writing journey, one thing that she discovered was that she is not writing the characters. She had to realize that she's not writing the characters in the story. The characters are really writing themselves and telling her who they are as a character. And she had to really realize that. And I think the same thing really kind of, portrays itself in the music creative space, is allowing the music to speak, not the critics, not your friends, not whoever they may be, but for the music to tell you that this is how it should turn out, and that the lyrics tell you that this is how it should be, versus, your homeboys, homegirls, whoever, like homeboys, I haven't used homeboys in forever, but, all right, for those people to tell you that this is what it is, or even trends, like you said. So I think that's a great piece of advice. Allow the music to shape itself and to tell you that this is how it should be. I love that. And for me as a producer, because people know I produce too, right? So they know. You may not know that, but people who watch the show know that I still press pads and still make beats, even though I can't play, instruments and strings and stuff. I got people who could do that, but I can't do it. So I will say this as we get ready to close out, and I'm going to have to go back and listen to this song because I want to really, really hear it, which is "Kill to Sing the Blues." I want to hear that song, and I want to go back and listen to it because I saw it on your Instagram about it being a letter to your dad, and I want to really listen to it and kind of just, because as somebody who grew up without having a father figure in their home, and my kids now have a father figure in their home, in the home since they've been born. I just want to hear what that letter sounds like. I want to hear kind of your thoughts about your own father, right? I don't know if I'm getting too sentimental, but I kind of want to go back and hear that song.
No,
I heard it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that song that came out, and I love that you bring that song up. You did some research, and I appreciate that.
People know I do research.
Not everybody does. This is this is what separates the good ones. I tell you.
That's
right.
right.
But I love that you bring up that song. So that song came out. The name of the song is Goner. And it came out on an album, "Kill to Sing the Blues," that came out in 2015. And that
so that's the name of the album.
Actually, yeah.
Okay.
It was a collaboration with Elronius, who's a Bay Area rapper, and my old group Tubers. And that was the last record that came out kind of before everything fell apart for me. And that song is such an interesting thing. So that's available everywhere. I think that record is still distributed, on every platform, so you can hear it wherever. And the song is called Goner, and that is such an interesting story to that song, because that is the first real representation of what becomes Fugitive Moods. So I was still kind of that's a rap record. "Kill to Sing the Blues" is a rap record for sure, and I encourage everybody to listen to it. But that song is different on that record, and I had written it, and it was a real experiment. And funny, I had written it. It took me 7 years to produce that song, believe it or not.
Wow.
And talk about failure. The reason it took so long is every time I'd written it on a piano, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I'd written this song, and this, like you said, this kind of letter to my father, who wasn't there for a lot of my life and has since passed away. And it's so deep and it's so personal. I just really felt it, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I'd sit down to produce it, and I could never get it right. I'd set up my project, I'd get things going, and it was never right. And one day, a friend of mine who is another really important collaborator on the record. You'd mentioned the drums, and my friend and musician Ben Corse sent me some experimental drum loops that he had been recording, which provided the foundation to the Fugitive Moods record that you heard. But he had sent me then this drum loop, and it was in 6/8 time. And I remember him telling me about it, and he was like, "Hey, I got this drum loop. It's in 6/8. You know, that's a little bit weird, but you know, it goes like this." And he started doing the rhythm, you know, like beatboxing the rhythm, and it was this like flash of clarity. It was that I had written a song in 6/8 and had no idea that I had done that. So it had taken me kind of years to not only refine the music, but fail at producing the song. And finally, once I had this drum loop or this reference point, I was able to see and produce the song that you hear on the record. And and that was the first time that I think that I didn't, you know, that I wasn't, you know, rapping on the song. Erroneous does feature on the song, but I'm doing all you know, singing throughout the piece. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was actually really the beginning of the direction that I was going to go in. Okay. And so it's so cool that you heard that and that you looked that up, and I would encourage you. I mean, that is, talk about a piece of your heart. That is, there is a piece of me floating out there, and that's, and make me a deal. Have a listen to it, and then hit me up separately and let me know.
I am. Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. So I'm going to listen to it, and then I'm going to DM you about that I listened to it. Yep, for sure.
Cool, man.
Man, so Fugitive Moods, it has been amazing to have you on and just to learn more about you, your music. I'm glad I got a chance to listen to your music. I'm super excited for your career, your trajectory, the things that you're doing. I know this is not your first foray into the music game, so I'm just really looking forward to your journey going forward and what Fugitive Moods has to bring to this whole creative music industry. So last thing is, where can people find you? How can they get a hold of you, and where can they find you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I'm on Instagram, as we mentioned, at Fugitive Moods, and Facebook, and fugitivemoods.com. That's the best place. Definitely from there, you can get to the single that's streaming everywhere now, These Walls. There's an easy link there. You can get a free 3-song EP that I've got set up for people who want to engage with me, give me their email and connect directly. You can also pre-order there is the 12-inch vinyl that's still available, just a few from there. But yeah, you can holler at me, and thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, you're doing fantastic stuff there, and hopefully I'll be back.
I appreciate it.
Be back soon.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That'll be awesome. I'd love to have you back. So if you could hold on for just one moment, and I'll close this out. And let me get to doing that. Ladies and gentlemen, oh man, I hope you enjoyed I know you enjoyed the interview. For those of you who were tuned in live, and those of you who are going to watch this as a replay later, man, just give it up for Fugitive Moods and just his insight into music, his creativity, and his wisdom for the words that he shared with you today. And look forward to, I'm pointing over here because, you know, I got it over here. But look forward to that album that he's going to be dropping next year. And like you said, go to the website, listen to These Walls, download the free EP that's on there, kind of give you a glimpse into his world. Check out his Instagram. But it was great having him on the show. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of We Create Music TV. You can always catch us every Monday and every Thursday for our interview segments when we have, you know, these interview segments that go on. We always drop in new content as well, from our master classes, tutorials, all types of stuff. So be on the lookout for more content that is coming. And once again, I greatly appreciate all of you being here. And as I always say, peace. I need to come up with a tagline. So somebody out there help me come up with a tagline to end the whole show. But peace. That's what it is right now. Peace. Thanks for being here.